This here is the Mini Countryman with the JCW trim. It's basically a run-out edition for the second generation F60 Countryman before the all-new third gen comes into Malaysia. Well, the question is it still worth getting one now today? Let's find out together. Let's start with the prices. First, the Mini Cooper S Countryman with the JCW trim that you see over here is priced at 254 or 264,000 ringgit with the extended warranty and service package, which of course you would want. That only makes it 3,500 ringgit more than the base Cooper S version. So that means you get all the juicy JCW trim for such a tiny fee, which makes it fantastic value in my book. What's even better though is that it's actually limited production. There's only going to be 168 units of the Countryman with the JCW trim made, all locally assembled here in Malaysia, of course. As mentioned, this second generation F60 Countryman will soon be on its way out in Malaysia to be replaced by the third generation U25 Countryman. But that model will arrive in Malaysia in full electric form, first with the petrol versions to come much later. BMW Malaysia is already using the exact same strategy with the 5 Series today. We have the new G60 all-electric i5 being sold alongside the older G30 petrol 5 Series. Just like the BMW, the next generation Countryman is going to be a little bit controversial. It's much bigger, far more upright in a more traditional SUV sense, and even the styling can be seen as a little bit too futuristic to some people. Now, I'm sure that will have its own set of fans, but to a lot of people right now, the Mini of their dreams will look far closer to this one right now rather than the funky new one. That in itself makes the current version still very much relevant to today's market, I'd say. Now let's talk about the specific JCW bits on this particular car. Instead of adding on just a simple body kit, the entire front bumper is actually different. The lower air intakes have far more horizontal elements to them, stretching the face sideways, making it look wider, lower and sportier as a whole. And in fact, this is the exact same look as the 400,000 ringgit Mini John Cooper Works Countryman. So if you like this face, it is now much more attainable right now. On the other hand, the regular Cooper S has more vertical elements on the front bumper at the far edges, making the car look taller, a little bit more rugged in that crossover sense, I suppose. If you prefer that look, that is still available right now, and you get to save some money as well. Win-win. The JCW exterior pack also adds on these 19-inch alloys, which are the same size but in a different design compared to the regular car. This to me looks far sleeker. But an even bigger and more significant upgrade is the addition of an adaptive dampers now to this car. This makes the car both more comfortable and sportier when you would want it, so it makes quite a big difference to the whole driving experience. Personally, I would gladly pay the 3.5 grand for the upgraded looks alone, but you put together the better, more advanced suspension into the package, I think the run-out edition is an absolute steal. At the back, this car looks nearly identical to the base car, which is not a bad thing. The second generation Countryman has always been a handsome and stylish looking crossover. The Union Jack taillight design to me is such a genius piece of design that they have carried it into the third gen as well. Specific to this JCW trim are the bigger and longer top spoiler over here and the slightly more elaborate center diffuser piece. But like I said, the rest of the car still looks the same as before. Now let's check out the interior. Stepping inside, you'll see the John Cooper Works straight plates, a logo on the new steering wheel over here, and just a darker shade for the head lining to make the whole cabin a little bit more sporty. But the rest of it is just pure good old Mini Countryman. And by that, I mean a stylish dashboard that is still modern enough even to this day. You get a full digital instrument cluster, a large enough screen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto that is wireless. The build quality is also pretty good from top all the way to bottom over here, and you get plenty of mini quirks. You've got these toggle switches down there and more up here. This one in particular controls the ambient lighting. You can just toggle it up or down to go through the colors, or hold it until it blinks for it to continuously cycle through all the available colors. They've done this since the original Countryman over 10 years ago, before all the other brands caught on. Beyond that, you have this big start-stop toggle that pulses before you use it. I think it looks really good. And while the screen may be small by today's standards, with Apple CarPlay on, it looks pretty damn modern. Better yet, you have proper controls for climate control, fan and temperature before everything gets lumped into the touchscreen for the next generation. I also like all the chrome finishes on the door handles and the window controls. Adds a touch of class to the rather dark cabin. And of course, you also have an additional set of Isofix anchors on the front passenger seat if you want to mount a car seat up front. As for things I don't like, there's only a few. The buttons on the steering wheel extends too far to the outside corner, so when you grip it, you run the risk of accidentally pressing the outside buttons over there. The digital instrument cluster is also a little bit low res. If you look up close, it looks a bit old school right there. And then you've got this electronic parking brake switch down here, which does not automatically come on when you park the car. And lastly, the wireless charger for your handphone is hidden within the center armrest over here. So when you close it up, you will likely forget that your phone is even in there to begin with. Back here, as you can see, legroom is not the best, although headroom is pretty good. For your reference, I am 167 centimeters tall, and that is my own driving position. So if you are much taller, you'll push the seat further back and you might not have enough space in the back here for your passengers. The backrest is also pretty upright. You can adjust the angle a little bit, but this is as far back as it goes. Even then, it's already better than the Volvo XC40. And speaking of rivals, this car does have the all-important rear aircon vents, which are criminally missing on the Mercedes-Benz GLA. Open up the powered tailgate and you get a pretty generous boot space of 450 liters. This may be a Mini, but it's a practical one. But even more interesting though is this. You can just lift up the floor and pull out this makeshift bench cushion. Here you can just lounge away, perfect for glamping, fishing or whatever else you may like. This is so cool. So on the move with the Mini Cooper S Countryman, let's talk about the numbers as usual. This uses BMW's usual 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo engine, but this gets one of the lowest tune possible. While most BMWs with the same engine have over 250 horsepower, this has only 182. Torque is on the low side as well, just 280 Newton meters of torque. So on paper, it's all a little bit underwhelming really. 0 to 100 is done in 7.5 seconds, which in this day and age where you can have a modern smart #1 Brabus, which is cheaper to buy to begin with, of course, can do the same thing in 3.9 seconds, taking almost twice as long. Yeah, that's not a good look. But if you do just throw the numbers away for a little while and go by the feel of it, I think this is not a disappointment at all. It feels like a proper performance car, this. 7 seconds or not, this feels way more powerful than you would ever need your daily car to be. And even if you want to bring it up to Genting and whatnot, this should be more than fun enough for most people. Together with the signature BMW 4-cylinder smoothness and the rather odd, a little bit offbeat noise that comes into the cabin, I think it feels fantastic. It really puts you in the mood to have fun behind the wheel. It also helps that the seating position inside this car is absolutely spot on. Despite this being a modern crossover, a soft-roader where more likely than not, you are just sitting in a tall hatchback. In this Countryman, you're actually sitting quite high up with a very commanding view out of the windows. From up here, I can see all the corners of the car. I get a good view out the side as well. Even the rear view mirror is actually pretty good. So in this Mini, you get a very nice mix of good visibility and exciting driving feel. That is something that you only get in a Mini, not anything else out there. I mean, even though the numbers may sound underwhelming on paper, this definitely has more performance than, say, a Mercedes-Benz GLA 200, and it's definitely more exciting than a Volvo XC40. It's the same story with the transmission as well. This may not have the legendary BMW ZF 8-speeder, but this has a dual clutch transmission with 7 speeds, which is very nearly as good. Here it sends power to the front wheels only instead of the all 4 in the proper John Cooper works, but I think that's fine to drive it day in, day out. I think this is more than sufficient, more than you need really. The shifts are really fast, most of the time you don't even feel it, and at low speeds it's still smooth enough. You don't even feel that this is a dual clutch transmission at all, which is definitely a good thing. But whenever you do feel in the mood, you can just flick the drive selector down here into sport, play around with the pedal shifters over here. Yeah, you'll have plenty of fun in this Mini Countryman. Fun aside, this is also pretty efficient. I've always thought that BMW's 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo is one of the best in the business, and here is more proof that it probably is at the top of its class. Driving around normally, including a rather spirited drive up the mountain, I've averaged just 8.5 litres per 100 kilometers, which is super low considering the level of performance that it offers. I mean, that's about the same kind of figure that you'd get in the Mercedes GLA 200, and that is a much slower machine overall. Next, let's move on to driving dynamics, where the Countryman properly shines. Even more so now that it has the adaptive suspension on board. The regular Mini Countryman Cooper S or Cooper S Countryman, whatever you want to call it, isn't all that bad, but there is always that feeling that it is a tiny bit compromised. With fixed or passive suspension, you can only set one particular settings for the entire car, so you're always making compromises. You have to make it comfortable enough on the straight roads at low speeds, but you got to make it stiff enough to handle heavier loads when you go through corners as well. That's exactly where adaptive suspension comes into play. Here in comfort mode, it is much softer than with the regular suspension. It soaks up the bumps rather well, unless of course it's a very sharp bump, in which the run flat tires with its thicker sidewalls will go all over the place. More on that later in a bit. But by and large, this is a much more comfortable Mini Countryman than the base car. And then on the other end of it, once you flick it into sport, everything tightens up a little bit, it gets stiffer, and you can throw it into corners with much more confidence than before. The base car with the passive suspension is set somewhere in between comfort and sport. Here with this car, you are free to choose between comfort and sport as you please. It may feel like a small difference when you first jump in, but when you start playing around with the settings and really feel the difference between the comfort and sport, trust me, the Countryman is a much better car than the base version. Now, part of that stiffness is definitely coming from the run flat tires. The Mini is one of the last cars to still use this technology, and while there is that benefit of being able to be driven even after you've had a blowout or even a major damage on the tires, you can still drive at a rather decent speed to your next destination, or more likely the tire shop. That is still very good. But the penalty for that is much stiffer sidewalls. So when you drive the car, you can definitely feel it, especially at low speeds when you hit one of those rumble strips or those speed breakers, especially the rubber, the hard ones. You'll think that this has really stiff sports car suspension. Even at speeds, when you run through bigger potholes or whatnot, you'll feel like it's a little bit jarring in here. I think most owners will end up changing to regular tires, and they'll end up with a car that is far more comfortable after that. One thing about the handling though is that the steering weight is definitely far heavier compared to its closest rivals, the Mercedes and the Volvo. Driving this car, especially if you're driving it fast, flinging it through corners and whatnot, it does give you a little bit more extra feedback, a bit of excitement and engagement, but the steering effort itself is quite heavy. At the end of a long drive, I think you'll feel quite tired, quite winded. Now, a lot of people will actually like this heavy steering feel of the Mini, but yeah, I'm not a fan really. But having said that, this is still a Mini, so even in its softer settings, it's nowhere near as comfortable as the Mercedes-Benz GLA or the Volvo XC40. The ride is inherently still a little bit stiff, a little bit bouncy, so even when you're cruising around on the highway at say 80, 90 or even 110, you might feel that there's a bit of a bouncing motion going on. That is still there, but again, it's not quite as bad as the base car with the regular suspension. I think between this car and the latest BMW iX1, both Mini and BMW are still having a very narrow window of operation between comfort and sport settings for their adaptive suspensions. They are still not willing to have a bigger window to make it even softer or even stiffer at the top end. I think most other brands with adaptive suspensions have bigger differences between comfort and sport. Now let's touch lightly on refinement, or rather the lack thereof. I'm sure you can already hear it behind my voice. There's a lot of road noise, a lot of wind noise coming into the cabin as well. It's not great in here, that is for sure. Especially here on the very coarse Putrajaya roads, it's nearly deafening, the level of road noise coming in. You may think I am screaming at you right now, but that's because I can't really hear myself talk. I have to talk over all this noise coming into the cabin, so yeah, sorry if I'm screaming at you right now. Even the wind noise is not great. As soon as you touch 100 kilometers per hour or 110, 120, quite a large amount of wind noise starts coming into the cabin. This is probably due to the rather upright A-pillars or the front windscreen, but yeah, it feels a bit like an old school car in here. As soon as you hit triple digits, you get a lot of wind noise coming in. Now lastly, let's talk about this car's ADAS systems, or again, the lack thereof. Now BMW and Mini were one of the last brands in Malaysia, well, just slightly ahead of Volkswagen, to bring in AEB, or autonomous emergency braking, on all its cars in Malaysia. But while this Mini Countryman does have AEB, that's all it has really. It doesn't have adaptive cruise control, it doesn't have level 2 semi-autonomous driving, active cruise controls, and so on. I mean, Malaysia, I know, is a bit of a weird, peculiar market because Proton and Perodua have basically spoiled the entire market. They have all these features even on the more basic, cheaper variants, especially Perodua, Toyota, Honda, and so on. So for more expensive and premium models like BMWs and Mercedes-Benz to not offer the full suite of features is just a little bit shameful, I'd say. Hopefully the next Mini Countryman will have the full set when it comes to Malaysia very soon. So that's my review of the Mini Cooper S Countryman with the JCW trim. This run-out model may have minor differences from the standard car, but they are all meaningful upgrades. It looks better for sure, and with the more advanced suspension, it is definitely an improved car overall, both for the driver and for your whole family inside as well. But of course, it's still far from being the most comfortable or refined car in the class, well behind the Mercedes-Benz GLA in those regards. But dynamically, it is still a true blue Mini. It will literally run rings around the Mercedes. It is just so much more fun, so much more engaging to drive compared to the boring GLA. So if you favor driving dynamics over comfort, this is the premium crossover for you. Now of course, you should wait for the all-new model if you want an EV. But if you're going for a petrol model, this being limited production and all, I think I might just go with this one right here. So that's all for my review. Do you agree with it or disagree with me? Do let me know in the comments section below. For now, thank you for watching and stay safe everyone.